Hi, I'm Sophie, and I haven't seen a lot of movies.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm here to help with that. And we are
SP Film Viewers. I don't really know what film we're watching, but I know we're going to be having a special guest on, and it's been a long time coming.
No, it really has, yeah. Been in the talks for such a long time, but now I feel like this is prime opportunity to talk about it.
I feel like I'm a bit anxious because it's you and him together make me a bit concerned and worried, and
Why is that?
you both like your horror and your gore, and
I wouldn't say there's really...
I don't really know what
this.
I'm anticipating because I've never seen this, so I don't really know what I'm going in for. I just know that the two characters of you and our guest.
Yeah. You can say his name.
Can I say his name?
yeah. He'll be very happy to. It's Danny Jones, yeah.
Yeah, which I'm going to end up calling him Jonesy the entire time.
Yeah. One of our patrons, no less.
Yeah, you're quite sinister and you quite like to scare me and you quite like the fact that I get freaked out easily. So
Yeah.
I'm apprehensive.
The film is called The Lighthouse. It stars Willem Dafoe.
I know that name, but I don't know why. Wallace
It's
Defoe. Why
Willem Dafoe from the Spider-Man.
Which one?
The Toby. Sorry, Toby Maguire. The old one from like
With
the
Emma
original,
Stone in?
the one we did the trilogy in, with
Yeah.
Mary Jane and
Yeah.
And it had Green Goblin
Yeah.
and Doctor Hopkins, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson in this film.
Yep.
Was he a vampire?
No, he's not a vampire.
Is it before his vampire days?
No,
or after?
it's after. It's 2019.
Is he actually becoming an actor now again?
Yeah. He's been more accomplished. Obviously, like when Twilight came out, he was picked like, oh, this guy's terrible and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, as you do, a bit like like how some pop stars when they start out like, oh, this is like bubblegum pop trash, and then as you get older, you kind of grow and you develop, don't you, as well? So
yeah.
So I think So in all fairness of like how we used to joke about how rubbish he was, but I think he's kind of upped his game a little bit in his performances. He's grown as a person, therefore his acting has also improved.
I haven't really seen him anything apart from being Cedric Diggory in
Are you going to say that?
Harry Potter and Edward Cullen. That's literally all I've seen him.
Yeah. So it's primarily just those two characters working off each other in an isolated situation. So
I don't know if he's going to be anything like Edward Cullen, kind of vampire-esque, then talking in a soft voice, I'll be like freaked out anyways. Don't know how anyone could fancy him really, like when they were Team Edward.
No,
I was Team Jacob all the way. Come on, you've seen the muscles.
Sadly, yes. Well, a brief overview of what the Lighthouse is two lighthouse keepers try to maintain their sanity while living on a remote and mysterious New England island in the 1890s.
So literally they're opposite the sea or the ocean. Are they in the same lighthouse?
Yes, they are in the lighthouse, and they're lighthouse keepers.
Of that one lighthouse?
Manning the one lighthouse, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so obviously... Yeah.
Already I'm thinking of that film where...
Shutter Island?
Maybe, or, when... Oh, what was it? There's a weird creepy thing that was going around, and it was like a security guard. They were playing with the lights and all of that, and freaky as, and I bet there's something weird going to come out.
Are you not thinking of Ghost Stories?
Yeah.
We did
Wedding,
last wedding.
Yeah. And that freaked.
Oh, okay. No, I would think it's more of a psychological, like, say something like Shutter Island in a sense.
That's fine.
Yeah. There is elements of horror, but I think it's more on that sort.
It's not Halloween yet, you guys.
No, but
if I can't sleep, I'm blaming Jones.
Yeah, by all means, it's useful.
I love how you just threw him under the bus there, Paul. Not the fact that you don't want to see it either. But yeah, with Jones's fault.
In 4K as well, so.
Oh, great.
That's why I meant about it being like a good time to revisit it. So yeah, so I know he's got a lot of notes. He said he's going to have to try and reel back on his theories and stuff about it. But
he's going to be so passionate about it.
Yeah,
is it? Well, at least if Jones has got loads of notes, then if it's leaving me wanting more, because I feel like normally if it's psychological, probably going to leave me on a cliffhanger or something like that, where I'm like, what the hell happened? At least I've got somebody bringing a perspective, which will make me happier.
Yeah, absolutely. So I look forward to it. And so next time you'll hear us, we'll have another voice joining us. So.
Should be good. Looking forward to it. Just hope I'll like the film, because otherwise...
Tentatively going into it.
Yeah. Only because it's you two. Just because yeah.
Well, you got through The Shining. You've kind of got past how...
Yeah, it's because how many times have I watched it now? Because of you. It's your favourite film.
Anyways, we'll be back in a little while seeing Lighthouse.
What made your last keeper leave?
Him, me second. Went mad, he did. Raving about sirens, merfolk, bad omens, and the like. In the end, weren't no more sense left in him than an hen's tooth. He believed that there was some enchantment in the light. He notioned that St. Elmo had cast his very fire into it. Salvation, said he.
And we are back from watching The Lighthouse, me lad.
Like a farmer.
But we are not alone. We're very happy to have our special guest and fellow Patreon, Mr. Danny Jones.
Hi, thank you for having me. Really excited to talk about what I think is the best film ever made about two men in a race to die first from either misery, madness, or horniness. It's a good film on its own, right? But in that genre, I think it's number one.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, I'm very excited to be talking about this one because I think there's a lot to unpack, really.
Yep.
I'm interested to know, obviously, of course, what Sophie made of the whole film, really. If she can sort of give her insights into what she took from it.
So I'm hoping you guys can answer it, but I am really excited I'm going to refer to him as Jonesy because that's always what I've known.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But I think I felt a lot of pressure knowing Jonesy was going to be on this one, actually. I felt like I had to do a bit more homework. I kept on saying to Paul, just to clarify, this is how it ended, right? And he's like, yeah, that's how it ended.
Yeah.
I really want to try and be as good about it as I can, because I feel like you two are coming in quite strong. And I don't know if I've really understood what I've watched.
That's not a daft thing to have come across, because it is kind of like one of those films that you have to sort of maybe see a couple of times to decipher, perhaps. But
can I ask both of you? We'll go with Jonesy first. How many times have you actually watched this film?
I would struggle to tell you. One of my questions for you, Sophie, is have you just seen it the once? Because it is definitely a film to redigest. I think I've seen it at least 12 times, probably more.
Wow. Okay. No, this is literally my first time.
Yeah. For obviously the purpose of the episode. Yeah, it's her first time watching it.
Literally just watched it once and was like, okay. Kind of one of those films where it leaves you wanting and asking loads of questions. And I think that's kind of like you were saying, for me, it was like Shutter Island kind of vibes. A bit of, you said, why am I blanking on your favourite film? Why is the name not coming to me?
The Shining.
The Shining.
The Shining. Yes.
But I've watched those The Shining, obviously, quite a lot of times now to Paul, and kind of get it, and I understand it and appreciate what it is. Whereas I think I've not been able to appreciate this as much because I don't really truly understand what I've watched.
I think that's fair. That's understandable.
Yeah.
How many times have you watched it, Paul?
Seen it maybe not as many as Jones, but maybe like 3 or 4 times, I think.
Okay.
Probably more than 4, I think. But there's still like new things to learn from it, and that's what keeps me coming back, and that's why I was sort of excited to be talking about this, because there's theories or like the themes that the film has going for it.
I'm intrigued to know kind of what the whole film's about, because first watch when you go into it and you don't really know anything about it.
It throws a lot at you at the start and it just doesn't stop, does it?
It really doesn't. The fact that it's in black and white, and that's actually an artistic choice.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like okay. I said to Paul straight away, is this going to be black and white the whole way through? Because some films can decide to change their mind. This didn't.
No.
The square formatting, when you've got a large telly and you're like, is it not going to get any bigger?
No, it's
Did you think the curtains were stuck?
Yeah.
I think it's obviously purposely like claustrophobic, and for the framing
Yeah.
of the shots and everything, it's obviously another artistic choice to do it that way, which I think works in its favour.
I guess, yeah. But can I talk about the foghorn?
Yeah.
I've never known what a foghorn sounded like. I know that sounds really daft until watching this film. I think I've heard it from a distance and called my sister a foghorn plenty of times. But oh my God, isn't it eerie? It's like this haunting, weird noise.
Yeah, if you didn't know what it sounded like before the film, you'll never forget what it sounds like once you've watched this film.
It goes through you, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think because the rest of the film is so silent.
Mm.
Yeah. Aside from the wind and
the
just the
rain.
eeriness and yeah.
Oh, I love
And
those.
the
I love
waves.
those weather sounds.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sophie, when I was watching this about a week and a half ago, I was sat making oodles and oodles of notes, and I just started to put together a list of Sophie's annoyances / Sophie's points to raise with us. And the very top of that list is the horn.
There you go then.
Did you know I was going to say that? I'm so predictable.
No, I think it's just because to somebody who is watching these films for the first time and usually watches much more sort of easy watching films, I think it's so counter to your typical film to just blare that noise at you, but I think it's there to sort of set the atmosphere. We'll see how many more of your annoyances I get right as we review the movie.
List, yeah.
I feel like I'm on a test now.
Like a bingo card or something.
Yeah, definitely. But 100% he knows me too well. Like, it made it eerie. And I said to Paul, I actually went, what is that sound? I'm like, why is it doing it over and over? And Paul's like, well, it's a foghorn. And I'm like, yeah, but why? And it just feels haunting and scary. And I don't know how they sleep.
It's obviously just a thing that it's part of, comes with the job and everything, and it's just they have to just deal with it, and they deal with a lot of things, the hardships of, like the hard labour of just carrying the rocks and or whatever they've got to do, painting Lighthouse, and just then it's like, at the end of the day, having a nice little tipple of their meal, and that's about it, and that's all they've got to do for 4 weeks that they're supposed to be there.
Yeah,
for 4 weeks.
Yeah, 4 weeks. But who truly knows like how long they've actually been there? As I say, they kind of I feel it's like it's one of those things where what they show could actually be like longer than a month or weeks and weeks and weeks for each shot and stuff. And you're thinking, no, they just there indefinitely, not actually there for what they specified. And there was no boat coming. Don't know.
Plus, if you think about what Willem Dafoe gets up to in the lighthouse, I think he would sleep through anything after the antics he gets up to tending the light.
Yeah. Should we just dive into that?
Yeah.
Are we going straight to that scene?
So with the light, it seems to be one of those things. Obviously, he won't let what's his name?
Winslow. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Tommy. Well, don't even get me started on them. Winslow up to the light, and obviously, I do feel like I'm going to call him Edward Cullen now because that's where I see
that's what you've known him,
Robert Pattinson as. And normally I see him as a bad actor. He had that kind of hardness on him, didn't he? From that, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, brilliant performance. I can't actually fault him. Initially, I did say to you, even though you told me when we'd watched it, I was like, he looks familiar. And you was like, Sophie, I've already told you who he is. But because he'd aged, obviously there's a big gap between Twilight and this.
Yeah, a little moustache, yeah.
And I was just like, and he's got more like chiseled jawlines and such. Mm-hmm. But anyways, the scene. He's not allowed to go up there. He's not allowed to do anything. He has to graft. He does all the hard work and none of the perks, basically, isn't he?
Yeah, he's basically under. It's like a employer-employee basically relationship. It seems from the get-go. Like you do one thing, I just sit back and do seemingly nothing.
Pretty much all he does is sit upstairs with the light.
Yeah, tend to the light.
But I don't know, it makes it seem like there's a mermaid or some kind of mythical thing with the light being like a bit of an obsession. And you kind of get a shot where some kind of sea creature or something is up there with him. And obviously there's lovely stuff dropping down, which you can kind of tell he's either wanking himself off or doing something. And you're like, what is this implying? I don't actually know what I'm valuing from it, apart from knowing he's jerking off to a light bulb, basically.
Jones, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could boil the film down to 3 different interpretations. And this scene in particular is the perfect one to look at it from. So we could look at it as it's literally just plain reality with Winslow's descent into madness. That's the vampire stuff. There's literal reality, but with Lovecraftian horror, with the tentacles and the sea creatures and the sort of prayers and chants and incantations to the deep. And to get a little bit trippy on you, I think there's also an idea of it being a trip through purgatory. Perhaps Wake isn't just Wake, but maybe is a bit like Charon from Greek mythology. And I sometimes wonder if if Winslow is actually dead and going through a cycle until he stops sort of giving into his baser needs. And each time he fails and suffers the sort of Promethean-style death, he sort of maybe goes back to the start, and Wake is just pushing his buttons and breaking him to see when Winslow finally sort of better himself.
Interesting.
Yeah, I got the sense of possibly being in purgatory and like all these kind of things that he's going through, really, especially more at the back end when he's kind of descending to madness. And it's like, I feel like they're one and the same person. It's like that's a reflection of him, and
that's what I got out of it. Yeah. By my first watch, I assumed they were both the same person with the name.
The Thomas, yeah. No different surnames, but yeah.
And I think it was showing the younger self when he used to work hard at the Lighthouse, and then what he became and contemplation and just obsessed with the light. I don't know. And then I think the eeriness of it all is just you're isolated on your own. So I was like, actually, has he ever had anybody with him? Is it just him on his own in that lighthouse and he's making up these characters?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I could think
something that supports that, and not to get too much into the technical side, but I know that in the script for the film, the 2 characters were referred to as young and old in the initial sort of, I don't know if it was the early draft or if sort of pre-shooting draft, that they weren't actually given distinct names, but were just referred to as young and old, which would support your theory there, Sophie.
Oh my God, see, how amazing am I? I'm well made up for that.
Yeah.
After my first watch.
Yeah. Well, it's funny to bring up that over the young and old, because I was looking through like some of the extras on the disc I've got and everything, and one of the things that Robert Eggers mentioned in that, or one of the articles mentioned, was the story was kind of based off of one story in particular. There was like about a small lighthouse in Wales, 2 men named Thomas. I don't know if you know this, Jones, but one was...
I've heard the story.
Yeah, one young, one old, and marooned on this little peninsula island, and then the old one dies of a heart attack and the young one goes insane.
Oh my God.
Something along those lines. So it's kind of like so it's sort of based off a true story or an actual thing that did happen.
Well, imagine that. Like, if you do fall ill and there is a storm like that, you're pretty much gone for art. No one can come and help you unless you've got like a first aid kit on the Lighthouse. You're scuppered, aren't you?
It doesn't help you from madness, though, does it? If you're going insane.
Well, no, but that could cause someone to go insane, seeing somebody die, and you can't do anything about it.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Well,
if you drink like those 2 fellas did.
Well, that is one of the things, isn't it? But to be fair, Winslow at the start, he's good and proper up until that.
He's a good boy.
Yeah, until he kills a gull.
Yeah. That's almost like his undoing, essentially, at that point. It's like, he was told not bad luck to kill a seabird, and
he damns them.
Yeah, he damns his own fate, really, and that's like the winds change and everything, and that's like obviously that the music at that point as well, like goes like dramatic, like oh, you did bad here, and obviously the gulls are not happy at that, and then it's like, yeah, we're going to teach you a lesson.
But to be fair, like, I know he was trying to be good, he was trying to do by the books, and obviously a seagull did die in his water, and he was pissed, clearly. Not actually pissed, but just pissed off at the fact that he needed the water. And it's like, well, where else am I going to get clean water from? But he did not need to whack that bird like he did. Is that on your list, Jones, by any chance?
It's not actually, no. The seagulls in general were. I wondered if you'd have noticed the strange effect of the bird sort of flying in midair, which my partner herself was kind of fascinated by that shot in the film where you can see seagulls kind of flying in midair but not actually moving. But I didn't have the murder of the bird on my list. I think my
didn't
list
see-
has already failed because we've gone quite ahead in the film. I predicted that you might talk about Defoe's teeth because of those giant fake teeth he wears in the film.
I just thought they were his real teeth.
I also thought you'd comment on the farting.
Oh, it is on my list.
Yeah.
Oh,
It is-
excellent.
Yeah.
Because do they not have a toilet? That's what I've written down.
They have a chamber pot, don't they, really?
Oh, like literally every 2 minutes, isn't he? He's farting, the old man. And you're like, he could just go to the toilet though, couldn't he? He pees somewhere as well, doesn't he? Like in a chamber pot, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's in that first,
Right at
like,
the start.
when they're inside the house, yeah. It's like he's covered by that beam, so it's almost like he's marking his territory in the vicinity of him. And then he walks away and farts. It's just like, yeah, deal with it. You're stuck with me in this room.
It comes across to me as an act of dominance because the first fart is very literally, because like you say, it's hidden behind the beam. You can hear the running water that you don't yet realize is him peeing in the chamber pot. But then the first you see of Defoe in that shot is he bends forward, so his bum sticks out into the face of Winslow. And it very much comes across as an act of dominance.
Yeah,
which is a bit of a theme in the film, especially the scene where he gets berated for not cleaning properly. Defoe has quite a monologue on that scene.
Yeah, it was like
sucking nails clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I feel really sorry for Winslow because it's like he has been working his ass off. Like, what do you want off me? And it seems to be like Wake has a moment of where he's only liking him when he's had a bit to drink. Like otherwise, he's not actually kind of there for him. He's like a horrible boss to have.
Yeah, when they're working, he has to be the top dog, but when they're talking in the evening, he wants a mate to chat away with. He just suddenly starts talking about a story of a ship he used to work on, completely unprompted by Winslow. He didn't ask it, he doesn't seem to care. And then the following day when they start working, Wake is just a monster again.
I feel like that must be hard to shift like that balance though. Like, for example, for us, when we're at work, if we did have a manager like that, you are with them for whatever, 7 hours, 8 hours a day. Then you go home and you can leave them.
Yeah, you escape that. Whereas he's there 24/7, essentially.
Yeah, and then he's the only person you are communicating with, which must be hard. Like, you must clash and get to a point of where you can't tolerate one another.
And Wake knows that. That's why he wants him to have a drink.
Well, to be fair, Winslow doesn't really help at all. I think this would be Paul's situation. I feel like you would be sat at a table and somebody's trying to talk to you, and if you clearly weren't interested and not in that frame of mind, you'd just be going, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Just like, yeah, I haven't got much to say on it, so
yeah.
What bothering? It's like just having to just talk for the sake of talking, which I don't really like doing.
Me and Paul would be the best pair of wikis. We'd just sit in silence, get the work done, go to bed early. Oh, nothing would go wrong.
Yeah.
You'd both have a tipple.
Yeah.
There'd be no misery, no madness, and no horniness.
Yeah, so on obviously the horniness angle of we've got going on with it. So we've got obviously the fantasies that Winslow has when he sort of first discovers that little like figurine of the mermaid and stuff. And it's like, oh, what's this hidden under the bed? So I wonder who that's been left from before, firstly. And then there's the whole fact of obviously as the story progresses, it's kind of like, it's his only means of relieving himself to satisfaction. So it's like, I'll just masturbate over a thing, and then these sort of visions become more and more visually realistic to us anyway, in terms of what he stumbles upon, whether it's probably obviously all in his head. But what did you think of the fish vagina?
Oh, that was disgusting. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I know female body parts and definitely her down below is not the prettiest of pictures, but there were like 3 of them. I actually did go, while we were start watching it, didn't I? It's like, I don't need to see that. And why is anyone visualizing that? Like a mermaid.
Normally you don't. Yeah,
you don't
when
see
Little
that.
Mermaid, you don't see that there, but it's obviously making more realistic.
I'd rather think they had sex like via the belly button, like a seahorse does.
I suppose.
That would be an end to the film if Winslow was the one to give birth, seahorse style.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'd love that if that was real for actual human beings. Paul knows I've said this several times.
Yeah.
But it is really vulgar that, in a sense, this is he's only there 4 weeks. Obviously, as it gets on, yes, fair enough. You could get to a point of frustrated and need to relieve one's self.
Because there's also the sexuality between the two characters, isn't there? There's a scene where they're drinking, they're dancing, they're slow dancing, they very nearly kiss, and then they have a fist fight, which is almost like a way of showing without showing a bit of physical relief between the two actors.
Yeah, the frustration's like, no, I'm not gay, get away from me. I'm a man, we're gonna fight now. Yeah.
But they need that intimacy as well. They want that physical touch.
One more thing to talk about on the wanking, if I may. It's a sentence I'm really glad I got to say. It was a question I had for Sophie, actually. Sophie, when you watched the film, did you watch it with subtitles or without?
We did. I thought it best interest because, so it's obviously like the monologues and stuff. I thought it best just to have the subtitles on. I think. So
I agree completely. I think it's a much better film. It's because of the language and how it's so accurate to the Victorian era. It's just so. Now, what I wanted to talk about was my 3 favorite subtitles, because there's 3 that I found pretty cool. The first one is just because it's constant, and it goes back to Sophie's first annoyance. Is foghorn blares is used throughout.
Yeah.
Sludge sloshing is one that was used when he was mixing in the chalk in the cistern. And the third one, which is just the best, is soft slapping.
I did read that. Yeah.
I came on this podcast to talk about how artistic and genius I find this film. So let's talk about soft slapping.
That's absolutely fine. I think it's part of the course. Obviously, like with the whole farting angle they've got going on, it's like you wouldn't expect from a film like this to have such a feature as integral as into this part of the character.
I guess it does show though that rawness, because to be fair, people don't really normally fart in front of one another. It's one of those kind of, unless you're very close to somebody, you would fart in front of them. And I think that's kind of showing straight away from the get-go your privacy. You're in a room with somebody who you don't really know.
Yeah, it fits the theme, like Paul said about the choice of the square frame, that it kind of adds to the claustrophobia, that your bodily functions and your private moments, and nothing's private in the life of a wiki.
Don't really know what their job is up at the top, what he has to do, unless it's burnt by fire, or if it's just a big light bulb. Then what does he do?
Is it in the 19th century, isn't it?
Yes, late 18th, early 19th.
So would they have had electricity of some description? That's what it's powered by. It's not a flame, is it, of sorts?
I think so. Yeah. So the generator that they're tipping coal into. I'm not Robert Eggers. I don't do all the research.
No, just
it's an interesting question Sophie has though about what you do up there, because Wake describes it as the watch. So is he literally just paid to stand there and watch, make sure the light doesn't go out? And I suppose if they have a stash of fuel up there to keep it going.
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that with Winslow with the coal? Then is that what he's doing?
He's
is he kind of igniting it?
Yeah, got to keep it lit in that sense, but so the light doesn't die for them. That's the purpose.
But you don't see him going down in the middle of the night topping up the coal while Winslow's in bed, do you?
No.
No.
We might be wrong. The call might be for the foghorn. We could. There's wikis listening to this podcast screaming into the pillows right now.
Probably.
The coal is for the foghorn.
On the topic of the book, I did look obviously more into what they were said in the articles and stuff, the extras. The fact that the bulb itself, when designing the lighthouse, that it was like a 12,000 watt bulb, so it was very bright, and they actually needed sun cream in it to actually be standing in proximity of that light because of it being so bright. That's quite crazy to have to be tolerating that, and also the fact of when the lighting of the shots, when they're at the dinner table and stuff, it's that single bulb they've got to work with. There's no other camera lights in the corner or anything. It's all natural light filmed of that, and it kind of makes. I think that really helps keep it more integral to how it would have been, and fits the cinematography of what it's going for. They're in that darkness. That's all they've got.
Yeah, it kind of helps with the way it's done and portrayed, and I think it makes you feel yet again that darkness is the isolation and the loneliness, and how eerie it can be to be on a lighthouse. You think they're really pretty from afar, don't you? But you don't actually realise what
goes into
it.
They do a good job of shooting that light to look painfully bright. There's some shots, some of the early shots of Defoe when he's making a toast to the light and he's lit so brightly and he's squinting.
Yeah.
And he does such a good job of giving it that kind of power through the images. It's beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it really is like the black. I've said that the black and white being an artistic choice really helps that, and I think even on like I say on the TV with the 4K stuff and that, like the black's like really dark, and so even like there's a couple of shots with that. Obviously, that square thing is not the full screen, and it kind of looks like obviously the two of them at the table for example, and they're just almost like in the darkness. They're like merging into the rest of the TV essentially with the thing because it's like black. So the black is just the empty space, so it's kind of like just ongoing forever, like they're just in this kind of like I say, like the purgatory element to it.
Yeah,
I think with the 4K side of things, and you're gonna hate me, Paul. I don't feel like it was one of those that I benefited for, but obviously I watched it in 4K. Maybe I'm kicking myself, and if I watched it in a different quality, I'd notice it. It just, but I think because of the age of the film it was going for, it looked a lot softer on certain outlines of the way that they wanted to portray, if that makes sense. Like it looked grainy, it looked old.
I think, it was meant to have that effect. It wasn't like a true like digital clean slate low, just because it's modern. No. It had to be cleaned up completely. In fact, they had like really old filters applied to the like shot in negative 35mm Kodak film with custom built filters and old lenses.
Oh, okay, I appreciate it even more now.
To add that element of it to give it more like it. But it's making it give the appearance of that old era.
So they actually artistically chose for it to not be the sharpest it could be.
I think it's added depth. But but it still like it purposely has that slight grain to it. Yeah. That's by the by. So I was like when you mentioned Jones before about the whole like Greek myths and stuff, I believe. Obviously, I think there's the whole thing of the Prometheus and like Proteus even and Poseidon. Obviously, like he's the god of the sea and everything like that, and there's that one moment where Defoe's character where he gives that sort of like he's like roars and he gives that long monologue, and obviously like thunderstorm goes with it as if he's like doing the curse.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
It really is, really powerful. Now again, the lighting in that kind of like emphasizes that aspect to him, like oh, you listen to me and everything, and just getting his point across, and it just everything part of that is really strong and striking.
I like the Greek references. I don't think it's too much. I don't think it imposes on these themes and the stories so much as it just gives a great flavor to the film. And I think this is probably how these wikis would talk, because in that age, the Greek myths were just everywhere and were so prevalent. And if you're a sailor, you're going to know those stories and those ideas. But the monologue of Defoe's is incredible. And I believe he did it in one take without blinking. And I heard a story that Robert Eggers sort of painfully had to make cuts to make the scene work better, even though he really wanted to preserve the fact that Defoe stared down at Winslow for the entire time delivering that monologue.
Yeah, obviously Defoe is like such a great actor anyway. Like it's never really gives a bad performance in any of the work that he does.
Kind of a weird relationship I have with these characters, if I'm completely honest, because initially I'm all for Winslow, and at the end I feel sorry for Wake, and I'm like, how did we do this full circle of how did I get here? Because you're rooting for Winslow because he's putting in the graft, he's doing the work, he's being a good boy for the 4 weeks, and then he just becomes an utter ass. Yeah,
we find out that he committed a murder before the start of the film as well, which is sort of probably specially placed for us to find that out.
I don't know if this was a bit where I was like, is this actually true, or is he now thinking that because he wants to commit a murder?
That's interesting, yeah.
So some parts I didn't know what were actually true value, and others were like somebody's imagination.
For example?
Towards the end, but not the ending, I have a couple of questions. So it's more when Winslow, he's kind of becoming the bad character, and you can see the kind of brawl between Wake and Winslow, and then he becomes a mermaid, or they become the sea god, and then Wake becomes like kind of I don't know, Winslow gets the better of him, and you're like, this is where I kind of think, is this all in Winslow's head? So the lead up to where he's like walking Wake as a dog and making him rough and got him on a leash kind of thing, and then burying him alive, is Wake is quite submissive at this point, and it feels like that's not really his character and who he would be like. So I was thinking in my head, this isn't real. Winslow wouldn't be this kind of person to do this. It's more, when you get to a point of where you get so annoyed with somebody, you can envision killing them.
I agree completely, Sophie. Yeah.
I'm getting brownie points today. I'm so proud of myself.
Yeah, when I watched it most recently, this was the first time that the burial scene in particular made sense to me, because as you say, that all feels like it's a bit of a fantasy, because Wake's been the dominant the whole film. Winslow now is dominant. He's finally calling the other man dog, which is a bit of a theme during the film, that Winslow hates being given dog work and told to do the dog shift and is referred to as a dog. Mm-hmm. And part of my theory for this, I run the risk of insulting the film, because in my opinion, when Winslow is burying Wake in the ground, the monologue that Wake is delivering sounds like sort of sound bites and nonsense that Winslow would make up thinking of what Wake would say, if that makes sense.
Right, okay, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see that now that you've said that. Yeah, definitely.
There was only one part of that speech that I wrote down, and that was in the burial scene, Wake says, "Them's truth," which sounds like something he'd say, but doesn't really work as a sentence, that them's truth. And I feel like, is that Winslow's head sort of filling in with filler what Wake might say if he was monologuing to him? Because if you think about that scene as well, after that burial is when Winslow then goes up to the lighthouse with the key in his hand, but then it cuts back to the lodgings just before the axe scene. And it's like, that's when we go back to reality, I think.
Yeah, because he comes back out now. It's almost like, oh, I wasn't expecting you were buried. You're supposed to be buried. Why have you come back? Like, oh, don't go and, I'll teach you for.
But then there's a lot of mind tripping with that, because then it's like, well, where it goes to Winslow, like, oh, well, you had the axe.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, wait a minute. And I'm like, oh, I'm so confused of who's actually trying to kill who, or are they just, is it they're both the same person and they're just wanting to kill themselves? I don't know.
With my most recent, because I flick between interpretations every time I watch this film.
That's what makes it so good, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think, as I said in my most recent film, I think I'm currently in the opinion that everything is in Winslow's head, that he's just been going mad from the start. There's one thing I did want to touch on that I thought you might like, Paul, and that's the idea, if we go on the theory that it is a bit of a kind of purgatory thing, that it's kind of a limbo before, like after death, before the afterlife, is if you think about the jobs of Winslow in the past, he was a woodsman, so you're thinking of thriving wildlife, whereas now he's on a cold, empty, barren rock, no real wildlife. I thought that was quite cool.
No, yeah, that's a good interpretation of that. Yeah, I was obviously, for the theme of like being in like the salvation and stuff, obviously the light being a beacon of like hope, and that's what they're kind of going for in terms of like, you normally go to the light, and that's, you're going to be, you pass on and you go to your next life and you're normally all happy and everything like that.
Yeah.
But for him, it's obviously a much darker end to the thing, especially at the very, very end, when he kind of go, think Winslow finally gets up there and think like, he goes to see what it is, and we obviously as the audience don't see what he sees, and it's like getting left to interpretation of what he actually sees as the light actually opens up the little door that it has and everything. It's like, well, is it something that's disappointing? And he's kind of just like, oh my God, I spent all my time threatening and getting, potentially killing someone for this kind of thing. Or it's like, it's just I think it's such relief of having that. And I know Robert Pattinson was told to give a performance as if you were having everlasting orgasm. That's why he's doing the faces and the screaming and stuff like.
I think you're onto something there, Paul, because just because he reaches the light doesn't mean he's sort of passed the test, as it were. So he goes to the light wanting redemption, and the light saying, "Not yet. You haven't proved worthy. Maybe there's another loop of limbo to go." Yeah,
that's why he's kind of he's left on the rocks, I think in a Prometheus way of the birds pecking at his innards and stuff, just left to die. And it's like, no, sorry, you didn't go the right path, and you're just left you cast out essentially from heaven instead of, and you're left in hell or this purgatory on this island. and everything.
Because I think at the end you can see logs again as well. Do you know, as the camera pans out on that shot of him getting pecked, and
Oh,
you've got the idea of the dream sequences having the logs in the water. It's like the water is where all these sort of earthly sins are based. So his base needs of a woman and a mermaid, and the logs floating in the water, like the memory of the potential murder.
yeah,
And at the top in the sky is that light that's just rejected him again.
yeah, no, I think so. And that, like, I think I looked up as well, like in the extra stuff they were saying about like how, like, say, the lighthouse being the knowledge and hope, and that was the individual consciousness, whereas the sea is more the collective, and like to do like perversions or things rising up from the sea. A lot of things do, like, so like the mermaid and those. I think it was logs and other things that kind of wash up from the sea that become apparent and make things more aware to us as the audience, and like reveal that Winslow is not who he says he is, and and he's obviously, I think it's come more apparent from that, really.
That'd fit well with Sophie's theory that Wake and Winslow are the same person, because Winslow pulls the head of the former second out of the ocean as well, doesn't it?
In the lobster pot, with the one eye, like the one-eyed seagull. Yeah.
Still being haunted by possibly another murder that he committed.
Mm-hmm.
So I have questions.
More questions. Yeah.
The logs, obviously, because he was a timber. Is that why we see them in the water, or is there something else I'm missing?
No, I think
so.
Yeah, because it's from his past. That he's escaping from his past, and it's almost like, has he, like I say, he's taken this job because he's in this story that he tells us we to believe that he's done this when he reveals, he spills the beans as he says to that, like, for his, like, to get past that, it's like taking his identity and just move. That's why he's goes by that. What was it?
Ephraim Winslow and
that was, I forget his first name. It's just easiest name.
Thomas Howard.
Yeah.
And the murder, have I completely missed this part? So when did he actually kill somebody?
We don't see that off.
No, I know, but obviously it's a conversation that's had.
Yeah.
But yet again, am I just bypassed it because I just feel like Winslow was a good character initially?
So between the kind of dream sequences and when he spills his beans, he tells a story of either killing or just letting die his former foreman when he was a woodsman or a timberman.
Right. So it doesn't mean that he actually...
No, he just, like a bystander. He could have saved him, or didn't do enough to do it. So it wasn't. It didn't straight up murder him. It's not,
right.
Sorry.
Okay.
So
it's more like a guilty conscience that he could have done more.
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't actually go with an axe.
But he didn't.
I don't know if Jones. I don't know if you noticed, or certainly picked up more of things on this time around. As a big fan of The Shining, and like there's sort of similar themes that kind of reflect in this as well. I think of, like, obviously going to an isolated place and sort of going insane. I think there was a couple of other scenes that kind of made me think about it a lot more this time. Like there was the scene where Wake, I think, we're obviously coming from the boat when he's destroying it, like, oh no, don't leave me, and then he kind of running with the axe, and he's almost like toppling like Jack Torrance.
Well, when it comes to The Shining, I don't know where to start. I feel like the light can actually be compared to Room 237 in a sense, maybe as a storytelling device rather than the films having the same themes.
Oh yeah, I know, yeah. But I thought, and also the when Winslow like discovers the logbook, and he's almost like flicking through, like Wendy does with his typewriter, and then even the music is kind of like, oh my god, like what's been writing about me kind of thing. But it's obviously like, obviously in The Shine, it's the old work and no play kind of thing. But in a similar way, I think I just picked up on those elements a bit more this time.
Yeah, I'll tell you a couple I always spot. Well, not so much spot, but quite early. It's actually quite early on in the film that we get the first dream sequence, which is where we see Winslow walk into the water and see the foreman that he let die. And there's some musical stabs in that scene that really feel like The Shining, like the big swelling moments of dread. Not the theme of the Shining, but some of the sort of shock music. Yeah. And also one of my favorites is the mermaid being a sort of tormenting, desirable female apparition, just like the old woman in the bathroom. Who, because in The Shining, it's a beautiful woman, and then she sort of laughs at him and torments him in the shape of the old woman. And in the Lighthouse, you've got the idea of the beautiful mermaid. She's a bit voluptuous, but then once he sort of moves his hand down and touches the scales of the bottom half, he has a maybe even a similar scream to Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, no, that's a good point as well. Yeah.
I did say about the mermaid being like the screeching as well of her. That was quite unnerving for me when I saw her. And then obviously you see something else as well, which is not pleasant. But that looked like it could chop his hand off, to be fair. She didn't need to be doing too much really to defend herself. But yeah, now that you've said that, the mermaid did make me feel a bit uneasy.
Yeah.
And that in The Shining, many a times that woman in the bath, she scares the living crap out of me. I'm so glad we don't have a shower curtain anymore. But to be fair, this didn't scare me as much, which was nice. I really thought, because it was Jones, I was going to get...
I did say it's not as scary as it. There's elements of horror, sure, but I feel like it's more just like almost like a psychological drama in a sense, really, more
it
so.
Messes with your mind. It definitely does. It makes you feel a bit like, what have I seen? What have I watched? I kind of don't know what I'm interpreting from it, and I think that's what it's going for.
But you can take it many ways, as we've gone through
different
iterations of what it could mean, and
it makes you want to watch it again just to see what we've discussed, to see if I can re-see it and see these other ideas of how it can pan out.
No, I'll watch it 15 times, like some loser would, and
I
then see
don't
what
think
you
I've
make of
watched
it.
15 times. I don't think I've watched my favourite film 15 times.
A big part of it is the atmosphere. Because Eggers has a reputation for being so historically accurate, I'm a big history lover. You can just sit and watch even just the first part of the film where they're just labouring day to day, and it's just so fascinating to watch. You get such a painstaking window of someone sort of painting a picture of what life would be like for that job, which he's known for in his films.
Absolutely, yeah. No, his attention to detail is immaculate at times, and it's he's one of my favourite newer directors. And I know he's like we're just about like even just looking at how they're dressed in the costumes and stuff, like how that's accurate to like the young and the old as well. Read that as well. Like they were specifically for the obviously like the more superior Lighthouse gear, and then for the one like obviously the younger worker had to wear a different set of clothes, even the symbols that were on the jackets and all that kind of stuff. That was part of the course as well. So it's
done the research.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Make it accurate as possible, which it's rare to see.
Definitely, it shows how hard times are in comparisons. Like, I don't know what a lighthouse operator has to do now, or even if we have them, to be fair, or if the light just is on and then if it goes off, somebody just presses a switch.
Probably.
Yeah. This day and age, AI will just do it for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just shows how hard people had to actually work and graft to get to where we are now. Also, you said about the killing the gull, because that was like, apart from me being like, well, why did he kill it? It wasn't its fault. You know, the one that died in your water, that's the gull you should have been gunning for.
Taking it out.
Yeah. Not killing an innocent one that probably has been tormenting him, to be fair. But you were saying that it could be in an old sailor's soul or something in the gull, and that was kind of the connection with it. Do you think that, Jones?
There's something to it, because the gull, I don't know if you remember, so the gull that he kills is one-eyed, just like the head he pulls out of the water that was
I did not even see that.
So I think there's something to that, and also that the weather and the wind objectively change at that exact point, that we see the weather change. We see the what do you call those things that tell you where's the wind blowing?
Is it a weather vane or
weather vane? Yeah, I was going to call it weather pointer. Yeah, the weather vane changes. Wake immediately sees that the weather's changing, that there's a storm coming. So it's kind of hard to argue with that. So even if you were to look at it completely literally, it's hard to argue with that part of it being something supernatural.
Yeah, just like the Shining, in the sense there's a supernatural element to that as well. That's why I say like the bad luck and all this kind of like curses and stuff that are coming to the thing. Obviously these like tall tales, as it were, as Winslow kind of states and scoffs. But they did have some weight to them, obviously, back in the days, and that's what I kind of like about this as well, because it's kind of almost like that. It's obviously not folk horror in the traditional sense, I suppose, but there's that element of mythology and tales of, like, oh, be wary of those, the mer people and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they don't get equal representation in cinema as folk horror, but you have to imagine that sailors and seamen and the wikis and everybody has such a big lore of history and belief that it must match that kind of folk horror weight to it.
No, absolutely, yeah.
I don't feel like a mermaid should be bad. But maybe that's because my connection is The Little Mermaid. So
which Disney took and made. I think is it Hans Christian Andersen who did like the original book, and that was so. I think it was kind of a sad tale. It wasn't like what the Little Mermaid that Disney put out was not the same.
Why is
And
she
if you go
bad?
back to the Greeks again, the sirens are obviously a force for destruction and evil.
Yeah, sirens and demons. Yeah, meaning that obviously like they lured sailors to the
Ah,
rocks, and
yeah.
the ship's crashing to it. So there's
Technically what she kind of was, wasn't
yeah,
it?
yeah,
In a sense?
the scream, yeah,
with screaming.
yeah. But normally it's a nice song that they sing to lure, but not the case here.
She just wants to torment him, doesn't she?
Yeah.
right from the first appearance. On that, there's one thing that I found quite interesting watching it is that I'll just get my notes very quickly because it's actually in the first 15 minutes we see Winslow's first dream sequence, if you consider it a dream sequence, rather than a greater force showing him creepy things. So in the first 15 minutes, we see the logs in the water and the body floating in the water. We see the siren. And we actually see the light in that early shot where Wake is making a toast to it. And after that 15 minutes, there's like a pretty long stretch where they're just doing day-to-day laboring. I think it's a really cool way of the film setting its stall out and then leaving that tension to build, that you've seen all this weird trippy stuff and now you're watching them paint walls and hammer shelves back into place and things like that.
Yeah. And I think that's where, for me, when you're watching it, you're like, okay, well, did that happen? I'm guessing it didn't. And that's when I was second guessing then anything after that. That seemed a bit unusual.
I think it's intentional.
I don't know if there's anything in the fact of, obviously, there's a mention about like how long they've been on this peninsular island and everything.
This rock,
yeah. Like at the very, like near the end, I think shortly after the scuffle and everything, after discovered what it said about in the logbook and everything. The clock that's going tick, 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 and almost like that also happens in like the cogs as well, and the lighthouse itself as it's rotating as if like time, like it's very obvious that time is passing, but how long has it been passing? And then he smashes the clock almost like just as if like stop time, and like is that after the fact when he like gets him on the lead and walks him down as if maybe that's time stopped at that point. That's
really cool. Yeah. I think that is just before they have that fist fight. It might be before the smashing of the boat as well. It's hard to remember exactly.
So there may be something there like after that has happened, he smashed the clock, and then that's it. Everything after that is just like nonsensical, or like it's
if it's real or not.
Yeah.
It could be a symbolic thing. Yeah, that's
maybe
almost
not. Maybe
like
just reading
Winslow's.
too much into it, but
no, I think we need to.
Yeah.
I sometimes think the film might have been purposely directed to be inconsistent, to keep us guessing as well, and to give us sort of red meat to chew on. There's some scenes where he acts just like a kind of neglected wife and an insulted wife, and there's like an odd couple dynamic between the two. But then there's obviously scenes where he's really cruel and domineering to him. And I wonder if sometimes, like the famous lobster scene, which I'm surprised we haven't quoted yet.
Strange, yeah.
Oh yeah.
He acts so hurt in that scene when usually he's so cruel to Winslow.
Yeah.
It's like a seal of approval, isn't it? It's like really wanting somebody to appreciate and approve of his lobster. And I think, isn't that where, if I'm right, the line of "I want a steak to fuck" is that?
Yeah, that's the same scene.
Yeah, I did write that down because it was like, of all things to say, why wouldn't you want to eat it? Like, you don't understand unless sorry, maybe I'm just not a man and I don't have as many, urges like that. But I would rather have, if I was on rations, I'd rather eat the steak than.
I don't think, maybe he's just saying it just out of like he so desperately wants it, he would just do literally anything to it. I think it's like it's just almost like a Freudian slip or something, maybe like a desire to, like, you would say you just want to eat it, but it's like, oh no, I'm just so wound up here, I would actually go to town on it.
But it makes you think if they are that sexually deprived as well, to that point of where it's like, well, it's somewhat flesh, isn't it? Yeah. Paul's face.
My face, I won't lie.
I'm taking it literal that that's what he wants to do.
It is a very machismo moment of he's talking about red meat, maybe the manliest kind of food you can talk about, and he's so sexually frustrated that he just immediately thinks, I would fuck it.
But then is that actually in his head, or is that just like he's so het up And I think it's rations, so the lack of food, too much drink, frustrated by everything. So not just sexually frustrated, but it's frustrated that the only person they're getting to talk to is each other. Because imagine being on that island and that's the only person you get to communicate with for God knows how long, 2 months, 3 months are on that island. I think even me and you would go a bit stir crazy.
Yeah, I think that's what isolation to that extreme can do to people, and that's why it's probably not too far-fetched that these stories were true of stuff, especially if it's based off actual fact almost, that this was a documented situation like this actually happened. No, not far from the truth to think that the psyche of people could get that far.
I think also it kind of makes you think of like Winslow as a character, being a good boy for 4 weeks, and then he looks at the book and he's like, and then he's saying, well, all throughout, even when he's done, he hasn't mopped the floor properly. Oh, I'm going to dock your pay. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. It gets you to a point of where you're going to resent that person and be hostile and be kind of bitter and twisted towards them, because like, well, the reason why he's wanting to be a wickie is because you get a good payout by the end of it, and he wants to start fresh, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And then he sees that as work is depriving him of that, basically. So you can understand why in his head he'd want to get rid of him.
It's a reason for murder, isn't it? Because outside the reality of the lighthouse, Wake's a man who's poor, young, needs a job, needs money, and he's had it all taken away by this man he's been stuck with, getting farted in the face for all these weeks.
So I get confused with how Winslow dies, and I keep asking you about this. And I know you're looking at me like he eventually gets up there and he's been pecked for the birds and such. But what makes him fall off the lighthouse? Like, how?
Why? What makes him fall down the steps?
Yeah, like, what happens? Like, is it just too bright, or does he get to the point? And like you said about, I know you obviously said about purgatory, and you said obviously
pushed down, like like when you say go to the light, maybe, and then he's like, no, not your time, and then he's just thrown. Like you see in other films where it's like you think they're gonna die, but then it's like, no, it's not your time. And then they zoom back to reality, back to the body.
Yeah,
maybe it's that.
Is it not?
I think there's a cut where you don't see the sort of exact moment he falls. I mean, you see him dropping down those steps, but I don't know if it's him stumbling backwards. Maybe he turns and flees because he's terrified. Maybe, as Paul says, the light essentially pushes him away.
It does make you think as well, when Wake's up there initially, there is like kind of a sea creature up there.
When Wake's in there, yeah.
Yeah. So is there some kind of mythical thing?
I'd say it as that Wake is that being because of the fact that we see later on when he's strangling him, and then he becomes like that, whatever sea creature is, got all the other tentacles behind him as like he's part of.
So you don't think somebody else was up there with him? He was just kind of.
No, I don't think.
You think he is one?
I think he's all that. Yeah, he's essentially a god, and that's why he can take what the light gives. Really, maybe, and that's why he's like, oh, you're not worthy to come up to the light, perhaps. That's why he's kind of like saying, no, it's a bit like, Adam and Eve type of thing. Like, oh, don't.
But then if he's supposed to go to the light, then your theory of him going to like the afterlife and wherever you go after you die, then wouldn't he already be there?
Wake or Winslow? Wake.
Because obviously Winslow gets pushed. But if you're saying that that's like the light is saying, no, you're not ready yet, Wake is already attending the light. Is he?
Because if he's potentially a god of some kind, then he's not. He doesn't die in that sense, does he? He's not. He's immortal, essentially. Maybe, I don't know.
He's a keeper or a tender of the light in a very literal way.
He's not affected by what. In that sense, he's not like.
So does that mean even Wake was even actually real?
Well, that's what we're saying. Whether he's
either a god, he's either Winslow
as an old man. I don't.
Man.
So he could be a St. Peter type figure, sort of guarding the gates.
Pearly white gates. Or is it that actually in the end Winslow is Wake and eventually he gets to go to the pearly gates because he can
at some point, if it's going back around to, like we said about like, right, not this time, but we don't know, because obviously the last shot is him on Winslow on the rocks being pegged to death. So
okay.
And then you rewind the film, start it again, and you watch his next attempt at passing the test of shedding yourself of your earthly sins, perhaps.
I think I'm even more confused now.
Job done.
So I have a question for you, Jones. How come, apart from obviously wanting, like me, the reason why I'd come back to this film is for several answers and kind of rewatching to see what you guys have said.
Mhm.
What's made you come back to it and watch it for 15 or more times?
Well, part of it is, as I mentioned earlier, that the attention to detail and the immersion in the atmosphere I've just found really comforting in a way. But also just how we've been talking about how there's just a different interpretation to it every time that I could sit and watch this film and think, I'm going to watch this under the impression that Wake is an all-knowing ferryman to the beyond. Or I could watch the film thinking Cthulhu is driving them crazy. Or I could watch it thinking they're both just regular dudes going mad together. And every time you just sit through it, you pick up different details. And I just think it's magical. For such a dark, grim, gross film, there's just so much brilliance to it.
I love how he talks about this film and the word magical of all words.
For such a gross movie full of bodily functions. I mean, we haven't even talked about the poo, which is everywhere in this film.
Poor Winslow, when he gets to empty the...
Yeah, he forgets the wind's blowing in the direction. He goes back in his face, yeah.
And he comes in and Wade just goes, you smell like shit. And you're like, well, yeah, I've got your shit on my face.
Yeah, so there's a comical element to, obviously, with the farting is like, you know, like there's an immature things normally, like in other films, like comedy films, it'd be like, oh, like really just played up on, but it's kind of just a passing thing, but it's kind of brings light to the situation despite the horrors that are sort of going on with it all.
Yeah.
So
I've heard Robert Eggers say, I don't know if it was tongue in cheek, but he said because The Witch is a film that doesn't have the sort of single moment of lightness, that he put the farts into the lighthouse to give it a bit of comic
I read
relief.
that, yeah, and there's truth to that. Do you have any other points, Jones, before we go to scoring?
I think we've pretty much touched on everything I wanted to get to sort of tuck into. Yeah, I could talk about this film, the minutiae, for hours, but no, I've really enjoyed talking through it with you guys.
It's a lot of fun talking and obviously theorizing a lot of stuff, and I think I've learned something from your interpretations as well. So I'm sure. So
I'll mention one scene that I wanted to ask Sophie about. So Sophie, this is one that it was on my list that you haven't brought up. So I've got this one wrong. Did you enjoy the what scene?
What? When they're going what like the...
That just reminded me of Finding Nemo with the mine. If I'm honest, it didn't bother me, actually, to be fair. I think I've just glazed over it.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the film. I just thought it might have stuck out for you as well.
I'm such a disappointment, aren't I? I think I was too much. I think probably rewatching it back, I will enjoy it more. But because I was too much trying to analyze what was true and what wasn't initially when I was watching it, and I think that when you do your first watch, it's a very hard watch, but it has that aspect of wanting to go back, and I think that's what's great about these kind of films.
So you would watch it again?
Yeah, just because the intriguiness of understanding what it is.
Yeah, a bit more. Yeah,
makes me want to watch it again. I think that's like Shutter Island. Like, I always think he's not a psycho crazy person. That's not what I see him as. And I think that's the bit where it really, really baffled me when he was actually meant to be that. And I'm like, no, I can't. And that really messed with my brain for quite a while.
So, Jones, we'll start with your score, which I think I kind of know in my head what it might be.
I'm not sure.
Well, the only film I've seen more than this is The Shining. Me and Paul very much agree on The Shining.
Yeah.
I would definitely give this a 10 out of 10. I'll tell you an interesting fact, though. I actually think The Witch is a better film. I think I just prefer The Lighthouse. I think The Witch is a better film, sort of more visually striking, maybe even better made, just because it's not quite so vague. But The Lighthouse is the one I would just sit and watch and chew over and talk about.
No, that's good. I do like Witch very, very much.
I haven't seen that, have I?
No, that might be a Halloween one.
Oh, don't.
I'd say Robert Eggers is like one of my new favorite directors. I'm with agreement on Jones of it being a 10. Really, I can't really thought, especially for the fact of obviously like the interpretations that it has, that you can go into it and think something completely different each time. And I say like the striking connections I can see with like getting to The Shining even more so this time watching as well in particular, and obviously that'd be my favorite film. Then it's like I can't not give it that high of a rating. So, Sophie, what's the
Pressure's on, Sophie.
No,
I won't be too like obviously because I say I first watched, but you haven't said that you would to check it out again.
Don't try and persuade me, you. I can say it's definitely not going to be a 10 from me.
I'm shocked.
I know, but I'm not going to score it badly.
Okay.
I like making you the anticipation. Can you
Yeah.
can you feel it? I can feel both of your energy.
I'm glad you didn't look at it as another Black Christmas, which I know you hated with a passion.
Absolutely despise, and still today hate it with a passion, like a burning passion. No, so actually I do actually quite like The Lighthouse. I'm not going to say I don't. I'm intrigued by it.
Mm-hmm.
It's got haunting areas, but they're not to a point where I got scared at any point where I was like, I turn it off, I can't watch it. It was always a bit trippy, but it makes you want to delve into it and come back to it. And now I would want to rewatch it with what we've spoken about.
Yeah.
You referring it to the Shining, obviously, I've watched that several times, and I would say The Shining is a lot more scarier than The Lighthouse is.
Yeah.
So if I can tolerate that, I should be fine. So for me, at this present time, it's going to be an 8, which...
Wow. Yay.
Yeah, that's pretty good, yeah.
I don't think that's bad.
I anticipated, actually, so...
Okay. Yeah, because it is really intriguing. The performances are brilliant. To say you've only got 2 people...
working off each other, yeah.
Yeah, you've got some mythical creatures, but, really... Technically, there's just 2 people in this
more
film.
or less, yeah.
Where do you really see that? The Shining have a lot more people, actually, involved in it.
Yeah.
Whereas this is stripping it back. It's like literally just kind of jumping towards where The Shining is, where it's got Jack and Wendy.
And Danny and...
Yeah.
Have a look, yeah.
Danny can be the mermaid.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother level of theorizing.
But no, thank you both. I've really enjoyed watching it. I really enjoyed this podcast, actually. I was more anxious and apprehensive, I think, just because I was thinking, oh, Jones likes really horrible, gory. I thought I was going to be like behind the sofa, like really, really scared, but I don't know if you've just got easy on me.
No, I don't think with the subject matter, we know what we were going into when we both pitched the sort of the idea of like covering this, but I think we know there was nothing to really worry about, but we're just obviously interested in your interpretation of what it had to offer.
Have I disappointed you?
No, absolutely not. And obviously
the opposite.
Yeah. No, you brought some other theories, or like to light of what you've thought of it. So that's always positive. So yeah,
I feel like an A-star student.
The Lighthouse getting an 18 out of 20 from SP Film Viewers is pretty damn awesome. And Sophie, you can let this be proof that there's more to the horror genre than just blood and guts and boobs and swearing and people running around with knives.
That's true.
Sometimes they have axes as well.
Yeah, and mermaids.
Yeah, bad mermaids.
Yeah, she was like a witch, basically.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Jones, for joining us on this episode. It's been a blast, really, just theorising and as such. But
thanks for having me.
Yeah, I hope you've had fun.
It's been awesome. And yeah, I'm just delighted that Sophie likes it. I know she always gives films a fair shot, but I know horror's not her genre of choice.
Yeah. I know. I don't really feel like this is a horror for me. I don't know why. I think it's more like a psychological... trippy.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, which I do like apart from when I got Fight Club like that and then you were devastated because it was like, oh, is this just this? And you were like, what?
Yeah.
And I kind of said it to you, didn't I, with this film? I straight away went, oh, is he just the older version of him? And you kind of just looked at me.
And nodded, yeah.
But it wasn't like that far on in, were we?
Yeah, I can't remember how far we were in, but you kind of, but I was kind of like, you kind of just seeing this a bit more, aren't you, with these kind of things. Like, is it just in the head or
Yeah.
that person or whatever? Yeah.
I don't think
So
my older
kudos.
Sophie would have the younger Sophie would have liked this.
Uh-huh.
Definitely not.
No.
I'm growing.
Yeah.
But long time coming with Jones being on.
Yeah, and happy to have you on again as a guest at any.
I
point,
feel like
yeah.
he'll be coming on for Halloween. Because you know what, it's literally October baby,
Yeah,
isn't he?
Maybe we'll have you back for The Witch. Perhaps that may be a good episode as well of another Eggers film. Yeah.
Well, I
I like
recently
the same.
rewatched Jacob's Ladder, and that is another one a bit like this that I feel like has loads to chew on. If you ever wanted to dive into that one,
Yeah,
that would scare Sophie though, so maybe leave that till Halloween.
And then I'll have a different thing to say, Jones. I won't be like, oh, it's an 8.
Yeah.
That won't get an 8 from Sophie.
I'll be on my high horse then.
Lastly, thing to do then is where people can find you on social media.
Yeah, I'm not a podcaster myself like some of you guessed. I am around online. I post a lot on Instagram under Weight Loss Jonesy. I talk about weight loss, obviously, and Warhammer 40,000. So if you ever want to see miniatures getting painted and me talking about diets and exercise and coffee, then yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah.
Sometimes talking about horror films.
Yeah, definitely go and follow him and like him and everything like that. He is definitely, well, I follow him on Instagram and I enjoy everything he posts. So.
Yeah.
Even his little figures.
Yeah, always got a funny comment to say about.
So funny.
Yeah, no, so yeah, you go and do that. And obviously, I'm very appreciated that you are a Patreon of our show as well. So
I'm a supporter of you guys. I think your show's awesome.
thanks once again for joining.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode, and a big thank you to our special guest. If you want to check out some of our other episodes, you can do so by going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and wherever else you get your podcasts from. And we'd really appreciate you leave us a 5-star review on any of those platforms as well. A big thank you to the Patrons for supporting the show, who are Mark from 100 Things You Learned from Film, Ben from Film Vloggers, our friend Jones, who is at Weight Loss Jonesy on Instagram, Sophie's mum, and Nico from The Good, The Bad and The Weird podcast. And if you would like a shout out on each of our episodes and the opportunity to vote on what we watch once a month, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/SP Film Viewers to sign up for as little as £1 or $1.50 a month, and gets you those little perks and helps grow our little community. And lastly, if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter and TikTok under the handle SP_Film Viewers. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and we will speak to you next time.